Have you ever had a feeling that something was wrong but couldn't quite put your finger on it? That's what happened to me the night I opened that file in the lab. What seemed like just another report hid secrets that made me question everything about what we do, what we know, and most importantly, who really controls our lives. Microchips, invisible networks, and a power that goes far beyond what we imagine. From that moment on, I realized that I wasn't just dealing with science, but something much bigger and much more dangerous. If this story made you curious, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters, and remember to check the pinned comments. I left an important tip there for anyone who wants to better understand the signs of a global collapse that may be closer than we imagine. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear this and tell me in the comments, do you think we are ready to face something like this? As a child, I witnessed the kinds of tragedy that no one should see during a cholera epidemic in my hometown. I saw entire families, devastated bodies being piled onto carts, and chaos in the eyes of helpless doctors. I remember hiding in a corner, trying not to hear the screams, as my childish mind made a promise that I didn't know would change my life. I will save lives. I will never let that happen again. This promise became my guide. I dedicated myself to studying day after day, overcoming obstacles and doubts. I graduated in pharmacology, specialized in immunology, and always sought to be at the forefront of science. Every degree on the wall, every piece of research published, felt like a small step towards what I believed was my greater purpose. Then came the big opportunity, an invitation to work at Novavita, one of the largest and most influential pharmaceutical companies in the world. To me, it felt like destiny knocking at the door. When I met Mei Ling, the CEO was impressed by her energy and vision. His presentation on the project was nothing short of revolutionary. We are creating vaccines that not only prevent disease, but, she said with a twinkle in her eye, but anticipate pandemics before they emerge. His confidence was contagious. I believed I was in the right place. The first few days were everything I expected. Cutting-edge labs, brilliant teams, and a sense that we were creating something that would really make a difference. But gradually, little details started to bother me. Some lab corridors were inaccessible even to senior staff members. Important meetings took place behind locked doors, and simple questions were met with tight smiles or generic answers. A colleague, upon seeing me looking at a document marked confidential, whispered in a tone that gave me goosebumps, "It's best not to ask." I tried to ignore it. After all, we were dealing with a high-impact project. There were rules, protocols, secrets necessary to protect the research. But even with all the justification, something in me couldn't silence the growing discomfort. Then came the doubts. While tweaking a formula or reviewing reports, one question kept nagging in my mind. Do I really know what I'm working toward? At that moment, it seemed like just passing paranoia. But looking back, I realized that was the beginning of something much bigger and much darker than I could ever imagine. If I had known what was coming, I might have stopped. Maybe he would have run. But the wheel was already turning, and I was at the center of it. The truth never comes without a price, and I was about to find out how tall he could be. I never thought something so small could carry such a big secret. It was a quiet night in the lab, and I was reviewing samples and reports as I did every day. Everything seemed routine until, by chance, I came across a peculiar file on the system. Its title was technical and harmless. Synchronization report, beta phase. Something in me hesitated, but I decided to open it. What I found changed everything. Among the data on the composition of the vaccine, one piece of information caught my attention. There, a device called the subcutaneous synchronization interface was described. At first, it seemed like an impressive medical innovation. A microchip integrated into the vaccine designed to monitor vital signs. I even thought it was something revolutionary. But as I continued reading, my hands started to sweat. Terms such as behavioral, remote control, and emotional adjustment appeared in the following paragraphs. Reports detailed how specific frequencies could be used to manipulate emotional states and decisions. It was more than monitoring. It was direct interference with the human brain. Words like brainwave, influence, and submission induction turned what seemed like an innovation into something terrifying. The vaccine, which was supposed to save lives, was being used as a vehicle for something sinister. The next morning, I took my concerns to my supervisor. The response was quick and cold. "That's not in your area. Focus on the immunological part." He smiled, but there was something strange about that smile. I felt like I had crossed an invisible line. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the laboratory began to change. I started to notice the presence of security guards where there were none before. Some colleagues avoided looking me in the eye, while others abruptly changed the subject when I approached. Documents that were previously accessible were now locked. It was as if a spotlight was on me without me being able to see who was behind it. But the worst happened. One fateful night, working late, I heard voices coming from a conference room. The door was ajar, and inside I saw Mei Ling and Bill Gates talking. I couldn't hear much, but two phrases froze me: population control and network expansion. The way they spoke was cold, objective, as if they were discussing numbers and not human lives. At that moment, the discomfort became real fear. Something much bigger was at stake. Something that went beyond anything I could imagine. There were secrets in that company that should never come to light. My mind was conflicted. Every fiber of my being told me to stop investigating. But my curiosity, or my sense of duty, pushed me forward. I knew I was entering dangerous territory. I needed to find out the truth. But the truth has a price, and I was about to pay it. Have you ever wondered how far the manipulation that shaped the world around us can go? As I uncovered the secrets behind the lab, a terrible truth came to light. What was supposed to protect lives was being used as a tool of control. The feeling of being trapped in an invisible web is a pain that many don't even know they carry. But what if there was a way to beyond the curtain? A guide to connecting the dots, understanding the hidden forces that influence the future, and finding answers to questions few dare ask. Therefore, I left a special gift in the pinned comments, an ebook that delves into conspiracies and the current global scenario. It was designed for those looking to better understand what's behind the headlines, and more importantly, what we can do to be prepared. Don't miss this unique opportunity to expand your vision. Content for you to explore while it's still available. After all, in a world where information is controlled, having access to the right knowledge can be your greatest weapon. I wanted to believe I was exaggerating. Maybe it was paranoia, a way to alleviate the weight of discoveries. But the more I read, the more impossible it became to ignore the truth. It was far worse than any conspiracy I could imagine. One silent night in the laboratory, when everyone had already left, I decided to venture into the restricted files again. My heart was racing as I navigated the system. It was then that I found something called the Behavioral Synchronization Protocol. The title was disturbing enough, but the content almost made me drop my chair. The documents revealed that the microchip implanted with the vaccine had a sinister function. He didn't just monitor vital signs as they publicly claimed. It was designed to connect to a global 5G network. A network that not only tracked in real time, but could emit specific frequencies to manipulate emotional states. The text was cold and technical, but the terms used were too clear to be misinterpreted. Euphoria induction, protest suppression, behavioral adjustment. It was no longer about public health. That was a weapon, a tool of mass control, capable of influencing thoughts, decisions, and even the will to resist. It was as if they were programming submission. There was a list of potential uses. My eyes scanned the topics in horror: controlling political elections, inducing apathy in rebel groups, eliminating unwanted emotions. One phrase, however, stuck in my mind: the population must be shaped according to the needs of the established order. The next morning, I summoned the courage to confront my supervisor. His reaction confirmed my suspicions. He looked at me with a cold, impersonal look, as if I were a problem to be solved. "You went too far. Focus on your part of the project. It's not up to you to question the goals." His words, although calm, sounded like a veiled threat. Over the next few days, things got worse. Important emails have mysteriously disappeared. Looks that were once cordial became suspicious. During one particularly long night, walking home, I felt like I was being followed. I looked back, but only saw shadows. Still, the fear was palpable. I knew I needed to go further. I couldn't just give up. One night, I broke into the section where Mei Ling was conducting secret meetings. My heart was beating so hard that it seemed to echo through the halls. There I found a file titled Population Adjustment Directive. It was even more terrifying. It wasn't just mind control. It was selection. The document talked about the elimination of individuals considered incompatible with the system. Entire people reduced to disposal numbers and statistics. The word eliminated seemed to scream from the paper. It wasn't just surveillance or emotional manipulation. It was calculated social engineering, planned with surgical precision. They weren't just controlling what people did or thought. They were deciding who was allowed to exist. With this discovery, there was no turning back. I knew I was dealing with something much bigger than myself. But the question echoing in my mind was, can I survive long enough for the world to know? My life became a nightmare. It was no longer paranoia. They weren't coincidences. They knew, and they were coming after me. It all started subtly, almost imperceptibly. My computer mysteriously crashed. Important files disappeared without explanation. During phone calls, I heard pops and whispers, as if someone was intercepting the conversations. And every day, the feeling of being watched intensified. Every step, every look seemed to be monitored by invisible eyes. I tried to stay calm, but I knew I needed help. My only ally was Tom, a lab colleague. He was meticulous and had a natural suspicion about everything. When I shared the evidence I had found, his reaction confirmed my fears. He turned pale, staring at the documents as if they had a life of their own. "This is bigger than anything I've ever seen," he muttered, barely speaking. Together, we decided to act. We spent nights planning, connecting parts and accessing restricted parts of the system. Tom, with his technology skills, found a coded report called Operation Submission. His words were cold and calculated. A detailed guide on how microchips would be used to manipulate masses, erase wills, and crush any resistance. The conspiracy wasn't just about surveillance. It was about total control. But we had underestimated who we were facing. One evening, while we were discussing our next actions in a cafe, Tom pointed out the window. Outside, a drone hovered, its lens trained directly on us. A chill ran down my spine. "They already know," whispered Tom, eyes wide. We left separately, trying to avoid any pursuit. It was the last time I saw him. The next morning, I went to Tom's apartment. The door was unlocked and everything looked spotless. Too spotless. His computer, normally protected by multiple layers of security, had been formatted. There were no clothes, papers, or any sign that Tom had ever lived there. It was as if he had been erased. Now I was alone. Every sound felt like a threat. The streets I once knew so well seemed hostile, and every face seemed to carry a silent suspicion. One night when I arrived home, I found the door unlocked. My breath caught in my throat. I walked slowly, my heart pounding. Nothing was out of place except for a single photo on the table. It was a picture of me and Tom in the lab. There was a red circle around my face. It wasn't just a message, it was a clear warning. My life changed completely. I cut off all contact with the outside world. I ditched my phone, disconnected from all networks. The evidence I carried was too important to fall into the wrong hands. They had eyes everywhere. But now I needed to be a ghost and find a way to act before it was too late. Isolation gave me time to collect my thoughts, but it also brought a suffocating sense of urgency. I knew that every second that passed put me in more danger. If I didn't expose the truth quickly, she would disappear with me, and I couldn't allow that. I spent nights reviewing the data I had gathered, compromising emails, confidential reports, recordings of meetings I had managed to stealthily access. There were even excerpts of dialogue between Mei Ling and Bill Gates that made the scope of the plan clear. It wasn't just control. It was total domination disguised as progress. I had enough evidence to collapse the entire system. But how could I share something so explosive without being silenced first? Traditional media was out of the question. Any attempt to contact newspapers or broadcasters would be intercepted. I knew they controlled the narrative and could easily turn my revelations into a laughingstock. The only way out was the deep web, a space where information could circulate without mainstream filters. It wasn't safe, but it was my only chance. Using an old laptop and anonymous connections, it took me days to set up a system that would guarantee me at least some protection. When I finally published the files, I felt a mixture of relief and fear. I knew the truth was out. Now all that was left was to wait for her to be heard. In the first few hours, the response was promising. Small groups of digital activists began sharing the material. Specialized forums discussed the documents, fervently analyzing every detail. For a brief moment, I believed I had finally made it. But the victory was short-lived. The next morning, the counterattack came brutally. Popular websites began publishing meticulously crafted denials, claiming that the documents were forgeries created by a deranged mind. Memes emerged, mocking my discoveries and portraying me as a misfit, delusional scientist. As I watched my credibility being destroyed, hackers deleted the original files. Entire forums discussing the data have mysteriously disappeared. Everything I built was crushed in a matter of hours by a relentless manipulation machine. The final blow was devastating. My personal data was leaked. My photo appeared everywhere on the internet, accompanied by false accusations. They said I was wanted for cybercrimes, that I had manipulated information to destroy the reputations of innocent people. Former co-workers appeared on television to deny any irregularities in the projects, and worse, accused me of being unstable. "She's always been prone to crazy theories," one said, smiling coolly into the camera. It was an unequal battle. I was facing a system so vast and powerful that every attempt at resistance seemed to be crushed before it even began. They didn't just silence the truth, they turned it into a joke. That night, as I read comments on social media mocking me, I realized their control went beyond what I had imagined. It wasn't enough to silence my voice. They wanted to erase any possibility of anyone hearing me. But deep down, a small flame of hope still burned. What if someone, somewhere, had seen the files before they were deleted? What if, among millions of people, one believed this possibility, however small it was, gave me strength? Maybe I couldn't destroy the system, but all it took was one person to see beyond the curtain for everything to change. Sometimes all we need is a spark to ignite a revolution. I just needed to find that spark before it was too late. After my failure to expose the truth, disappearing became my only option. It was not an easy choice, but a necessity. The system I faced was relentless, and I knew that if I stayed in sight, I wouldn't survive for long. I fled without a trace, avoiding cameras, main roads, and any device that could be used to locate me. The fear of being found dictated my every step. Finally, I found shelter in a forgotten cabin in a dense forest, a place where time seemed to stand still. There, the silence was absolute. There was no cell phone signal, internet, or any connection to the modern world, just isolation. The days were difficult, but the nights were unbearable. The rustling of the leaves, the crackling of the trees, even the wind seemed to carry a message. I was not completely alone. Paranoia became my only companion, but also my greatest protection. However, isolation brought inevitable reflections, far from everything and everyone. I asked myself several times how I got to this point. Why had all this happened? Why did my attempts to do good lead me to such a terrible nightmare? I believed I was saving lives, but now I lived in hiding while a global conspiracy consolidated its power. My only link to the world was an old radio I found in the cabin. For months, I heard news that confirmed my worst fears. The technology I helped develop was being implemented on a global scale, under the guise of scientific breakthroughs and safety for all. Smart vaccines and the 5G network were connecting every aspect of people's lives. Mei Ling, now a world-renowned figure, was celebrated for her incredible innovations. Bill Gates, in turn, was constantly praised as the great philanthropist of our era. Both were presented as heroes, while I, who knew the truth, lived on the sidelines, discredited and forgotten. Listening to these reports was excruciating. Every word extolling modern solutions only reinforced the power of the system and the effectiveness of the control they exercised. Vaccines that I knew were tools of surveillance and manipulation were now seen as the salvation of humanity. They won, I thought, as the radio announcer's voice celebrated the success of the vaccination campaign. But what tormented me most was not the fact that they had won. It was the possibility that no one would ever discover the truth. The documents I published had been deleted. My reputation had been destroyed, my voice silenced. Still, I refused to give up completely. I started recording everything in notebooks, detailing each discovery and each event I experienced. I wrote with the hope that if I couldn't tell my story now, someone in the future might find it. In addition to notebooks, I encoded messages in everyday objects, hiding them in places close to the cabin. Questions tormented me. Will anyone believe me? Will my evidence be found? Or will they too disappear like I disappeared? Still, there was a small spark of hope. Maybe I would never see the fruits of my struggle. But maybe one day someone would find my story and decide to fight. Even if the world doesn't listen to me now, maybe one day someone will. Maybe there is still hope, even if I never see it. My old radio became the only bridge between my exile and the world I could no longer touch. Every piece of news I heard confirmed what I feared. The conspiracy I discovered was not only real, it was unfolding exactly as planned. The broadcasts were filled with excitement about technological wonders. Smart vaccines, capable of monitoring health in real time. were presented as the key to preventing future pandemics. 5G networks connected every aspect of modern life, from homes to entire cities. People seemed fascinated by the idea of a more integrated and efficient world. I knew the truth, but I felt a lump in my throat when I heard the familiar names. One report highlighted Mei Ling as one of the most brilliant minds of our era, extolling her revolutionary vision in global health. Bill Gates, mentioned almost reverently, was described as the architect of a future where no one would be left behind. They were celebrated as heroes, while I, who knew the true purpose of their actions, was forgotten, discredited, and isolated. They turned the enemy into a hero and the truth into fiction. I thought as I listened to the carefully articulated words of the announcer. People seemed to accept everything without question. Smart vaccines, incredible progress, 24-hour monitoring, and necessary sacrifice for safety. Nobody questioned the real cost of this integration. It wasn't just the advancement of technology, it was the advancement of absolute control, disguised as innovation. But one night, a broadcast ignited something inside me. Small protests began to emerge in large cities. Some groups questioned transparency and raised doubts about these technologies. There weren't many, and they were quickly discredited as conspiracy theorists. However, the simple fact that there were people resisting gave me a spark of hope. Most, however, were trapped in the invisible web that I knew so well. To them, everything seemed normal, or even a desirable advance. To me, who had seen what was behind the scenes, it was clear that freedom had been exchanged for a false sense of security. They took over the world, I wrote in my notebook. But did they take everything? Even in my isolation, I continued to believe that absolute control was impossible. There would always be flaws, cracks, gaps, where the truth could escape. Somewhere, someone must be fighting too. The system may be powerful, I thought, but the truth always finds a way to emerge, even if it takes time. Isolated in the solitude of my cabin, I realized that my fight was no longer about overthrowing the system. This battle was beyond my reach. But there was something I could still do: plant seeds for the future. If I couldn't win, maybe I could help someone who tried after me. In the silence of the endless nights, I sat by candlelight, recording everything I knew. Every document I analyzed, every conversation I overheard, every detail that proved the magnitude of the global conflict conspiracy was meticulously noted. I didn't just write for myself. I wrote for anyone who in the future would have enough courage to seek the truth. But I knew that words on paper could be discarded or destroyed. It was necessary to be more creative. I spent weeks encoding messages into everyday objects. Notes hidden in books, numbers etched in photographs, and maps with clues hidden in their folds. I separated these items and left them in places close to the cabin. Spots on trails, rock crevices, even under trees marked with subtle symbols. These messages were not just information. They were invitations for reflection. Do you blindly trust those who claim to protect your health and safety? Who really has control of the technologies that shape our lives? Is the freedom you believe you have genuine or a well-crafted illusion? One day, while adjusting the radio to listen to the news, an unusual broadcast caught my attention. An anonymous group claimed to have leaked confidential information about a large pharmaceutical company. It was obvious that they were fighting the same network as me. My heart accelerated. The media quickly ridiculed the allegations, calling them baseless theories. However, just the fact that someone was resisting rekindled my hope. That night, as I blew out the candles, I looked at the notebooks piled on the table. I took a deep breath and wrote one last message. If you found this, know that there is still time. They may control the present, but the future belongs to those who dare to fight. Fight, question, resist. The system is powerful, but the truth is persistent. No matter how much time passes, she always finds a way. I knew that my words might never be read, that my efforts might be in vain. But I also knew that truth cannot be destroyed, only delayed. Perhaps one day, when the world is more caught up in conformity, my messages will serve as a beacon for those who do not surrender. The truth never dies. It only awaits those who have the courage to seek it. Do you believe that everything we know about the world is under control? Or is there something else going on in the shadows? If this story made you reflect on what might be happening behind the scenes, now is the time to act. Don't let important information get lost in the noise. Click the like button to support this type of content, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Who knows, in the next video, you might find answers to the questions you've always had, or even discover new ones. Share this video with anyone you think needs to know this. It is important that more people start to question what is happening around us. Often it's the stories we ignore that have the biggest impact. Oh, and a special souvenir in the pinned comments. I left something that could transform your view of the world. An exclusive ebook about the global collapse. It is more than a simple text. It is a tool for those who want to understand the signs and be prepared for what is coming. This gift is almost sold out, so grab it while it's available. It's discreet, direct, and essential for those who don't want to be caught off guard. After all, information can be the difference between being controlled and being free. Take the next step now. Like, subscribe, and check out the gift in the pinned comments. You are closer to seeing what is really happening than you think.